Look, you do the right thing for the environment because it's the right thing to do, not because somebody scares you into it. Okay, here's the problem with anthropogenic global warming, right? Man-made, man-caused global warming. The CRU, right? It's the group of limey lab coats over at the University of East Anglia. They collate all the global warming data. They take it from other places. They don't do any of the research themselves, but they put together the bigger picture on global warming for us, right? They gave us the hockey stick graph, which is flagrant propaganda. They were hacked, and their emails spread all over the internets. One email reads, "I've just completed Mike's nature trick of adding in the real temps to each series for the last 20 years, and from 1961 for Keith's to hide the decline." So, brilliant people asked, "Hey man, why are you using tricks to hide stuff?" And they say, well, Mike's nature trick isn't so much of a fool you trick, it's more of a nifty way to show two different data sets in the same graph. And hide the decline simply refers to the divergence problem. So we'll take those one at a time, right? Mike's nature trick. In science today, it's all about how you weigh your data, okay? So let's say you're studying something like tree ring growth over time. And you have a lot of old dead wood, and it paints you a picture of what it was like in the past. But you can't be sure about a lot of that wood, the conditions it was subjected to after it was cut down, if it was cut down. There's a lot of variables involved. It's not hard data. But then a study comes along 100 years ago or something and starts collecting hard data on precisely this subject, right? You want that data in your study, and you feel justified that it should be weighted more than the other stuff. The other stuff's more of an estimate. This is as close to hard fact as we can come at this point. Mike's nature trick is to use color to show when you're weighing the evidence differently. This is what's being done in the hockey stick graph. And it tells you so right in the bottom right. Data from thermometers in red and from proxy sources, tree rings, corals, ice cores, historical records in blue. Problem with the hockey stick graph is that a lot of people say that the blue part of that evidence is very heavily weighted on the tree rings. The reason they say that is because the previous global consensus, scientific consensus on global temperature looked something more like this. There were swings, peaks and valleys, medieval warming period and a little ice age. And the reason they say that is because they find evidence, archaeological evidence of farming in the permafrost in Greenland. Greenland was aptly named for its time. There had to be a time when the world was hotter than this. Otherwise, you couldn't have that farming. There is plenty of evidence that tree rings are notoriously bad at predicting climate. There's even a study that shows cosmic rays influence tree ring size more than precipitation. Mike's nature trick allows you to use imperfect, flawed evidence and hard evidence all in the same graph, and you denote this by changing the color. So in this first email, they're saying they're going to use Mike's nature trick of switching colors in order to hide the decline. They tell us that hide the decline simply refers to the divergence problem. The divergence problem is the Schweingruber variation. The Schweingruber variation is that if you continued to graph the hockey stick all in blue, if you didn't switch colors, you continued to weigh the evidence exactly as it's been weighed the entire graph, that graph actually goes down at the end. This is one of the many reasons why you don't use tree rings to determine climate. This graph shows the blue tree ring data graphed in black and the hockey stick archived data graphed in red. Notice how they diverge. So email 1 and their answer to it clearly tells us that they are using color to denote a change in the data set, and we're changing that data set because our original data set doesn't prove what we wanted it to prove. Email 1 and their answer to it tells us that they're using color to hide the decline in the values on their graphs. It kind of feels like they're throwing a lot of lumber at me, calling it tree rings, and using it to obscure my view of the medieval warming period and the Little Ice Age. Why would they do that? Well, this graph is Danger Will Robinson. This is an emergency, man. You have to do something about this, preferably spend a lot of money. That is just not the story in this graph. This graph is business as usual. So that's email 1, okay? We'll move on to 2 and 3, right? 2, I think we have to stop considering climate research as a legitimate peer-reviewed journal. Email 3, the other paper by is just garbage. I can't see either of these papers being in the next IPCC report. Kevin and I will keep them out somehow, even if we have to redefine what the peer-review literature is. Now, I'm not a scientist, but you can't do that. I mean, the whole idea of peer review is to get as many different people as possible that can replicate your results. That's how things become law, you know, that's how you build. Everybody gets to agree because everybody can do the exact same thing you did and see the same results. If you're only picking your friends who are going to agree with you, then that ain't science, right? Email 4, dude, those pesky MMs have been after the CRU station data for years. If they ever hear there's a Freedom of Information Act now in the UK, I think I'll delete the file rather than send to anyone. We also have a Data Protection Act, which I will hide behind. More hiding. Breaking the law, breaking the law. I mean, I think this is why one of those mother buggerin' limeys resigned over there. I mean, if it's not criminal, I don't think you have much of a case if you're going to try and argue the ethical merits of email 4. What they tell us about global warming is that you have rays that come in to the Earth from the sun. They bounce back out. Most of that goes out into space, outgoing long-wave radiation. Some of that gets reflected back down towards the Earth based on what's in the atmosphere. The anthropogenic global warming argument is that as we pump more CO2 into the atmosphere, those red reflected rays will increase and heat the Earth up. It's a fine theory, just doesn't fit with what we observe in a lot of different places. This is a good one, dude. Anomalous redistribution of the Earth's radiation budget components. Intimidating sounding as hell. Bagolovko and Kondranen. In it, they state that for the last 20 years, the reflected solar radiation decreased. Now, by a smaller amount, it does say that, but that doesn't matter. We don't really care about the amount. It's comparing it to the outgoing long-wave radiation. We don't care how much. The point is, all this time we've been pumping more CO2 into the atmosphere. The red reflected radiation decreased. That ain't supposed to happen, right? Golovko and Kondranen are so good because the frequency of radiation that CO2 blocks, it looks like there is some reflected back there, more reflected back there, but the other frequencies surrounding it compensate, as if the ecosystem were intelligently self-correcting. Ha! Look, man, of the entire greenhouse gas effect, water vapor is 95% of it, 3.5% to carbon dioxide, and then the amount of carbon dioxide that humans are putting into the environment, the graph just keeps getting more minuscule. I do what's right for the environment because I'm not a punk. No, but not because somebody scares me into it. This is a dirty war fought with lies. And just because it's in the right corner does not make it right.